comes from Nate, and he says that my wife gets angry and goes to her room and will not speak to me and says, just leave me alone. The problem is that she won't speak about the issue for several days, and those days are a living hell for me. I go through the fear of her being in there deciding to leave me. How do I go away and give her space without being afraid of her leaving?
Well, it is tough. Withdrawal is one of the most painful things we can do in a relationship to our partner. At the same time, I do think that withdrawal is the appropriate action when we're going to do damage. In other words, if we're going to say something that we're going to regret, if we're going to just come out and lash out, I do think taking a break, taking some time, cooling off, and really, getting those feelings under control before you have those conversations is a good idea. 2 or 3 days sounds like punishment to me. That doesn't sound like she's taking time to cool off. It sounds like I'm going to make you hurt for whatever it is you just did, and then by the time we have this conversation, you will do whatever I want. So it feels very manipulative to me.
It's kind of punitive, huh?
It feels very punitive to me. I mean, we need a couple hours to cool down. We don't need a couple days to cool down. So it feels like to some degree that's somewhat on purpose. That and again, I haven't talked to them or her, but I mean, maybe she has a temper that she needs 3 days to cool off, but. Probably she's just trying to that's a dance that they do, that she pulls away, he feels bad, and then eventually when they have the conversation, he's sort of like, okay, well, I'll do whatever you want because you're not leaving me.
And he's petrified, right? So at this point he is going to be... Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, that's going to backfire with her. Or potentially backfire with her, because that gets old, and after a while you can leave somebody long enough, and I'm not saying that he would do this, I'm sure he's an honorable man, but you become vulnerable to someone else who's not punishing you coming along, someone telling you you're a great husband, someone telling you you're a great man. It's a dangerous state to leave your relationship in that kind of limbo for any length of time. And then I have a part 2 to that conversation, which is the alternative for me, and I know it could be, I'm saying either or, the alternative is that she doesn't feel safe having conversations with him. So sometimes we withdraw and we are not going to talk about it because we feel like if we start to talk about it, you're going to give me a lot of excuses. You're going to tell me why I'm wrong. You're going to tell me all of the reasons why I shouldn't feel that way. You're going to tell me,
That's sort of the whole point about gracefully accepting a concession and all that we talk about in our system.
Right, exactly. Sometimes people don't have those conversations because they feel like they're not going to get them anywhere. So sometimes people retreat and they'll go through the whole conversation themselves in their own heads. Well, I would say this, and then he would say that, and then I would say this, and he'd probably say that. And then, they end up with, but they're not often right about the conclusions.
Right.
And they come out with a fact of how this whole thing would have gone down when in actuality they never actually had that conversation with that person. So again, not a great policy. I would really highly recommend, again, I've said this 1,000 times, communication is a learned skill.
Right.
Communication is not just talking. We all learned how to talk when we were a year old. That's not what it's about. It's about learning how to exchange ideas, hear each other, understand each other, learning how to fight effectively. Communication has so many components that just most of us were not taught. I was not taught. Right. I had to learn it later in life.
Right.
I had to learn it after I was married. I had to learn it in graduate school. We've told the story before about how I had to figure out how to communicate to save my own marriage.
Right.
So, it really, I would recommend that if only one person does it, that would be fine. But if they can both sit down and learn how to communicate, even before she comes out of the bedroom and has these conversations, because just coming out of the bedroom and ineffectively communicating isn't going to solve anything.
Right.
So really, maybe, again, having him get a hold of that information in some way, or hopefully he's already bought the system and going over that communication stuff so that she starts to feel safe having those conversations. And then, unfortunately, also someone's going to have to call her out on the whole punishing, possibly manipulating part of the whole thing and how ineffective that is and dangerous that is.
And, Is Nate the right person to call her out on that?
Well, if Nate can get her this video, that would be much better, actually.
Yeah.
much nicer for him.
How would Nate? How would you recommend that Nate, kind of regains power and
power is covered in the system as well. So if you wanted to take a look at that section, and I believe it's in the communication section actually, about how withholding forgiveness is a form of maintaining power, which in fact what she's doing over it's in the forgiveness section.
Videos, yeah.
Right. So it's if he can get that information to her, would be really, really helpful. And you're right, you're absolutely right. It does tend to help from hearing it from a third party. Couples come to me all the time, and I'll say something, and the other person will have an epiphany, and the one partner says, "I've been telling you that for years," but it does somehow help to